Heart too high. Praise the Lord, church. So when the Lord put this on my heart to put this together, I thought I was going to be talking to some other people. So that's not an insult. It's just where my mind was at when I was putting it down. So anyways, not that matters. And I believe it's supposed to be for tonight, because when Brother Brandon texted me and asked me, I said, yep, I got something. And I knew exactly what it was supposed to be. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get started. There we go. So I want to start out with a story. I'm sure we can all relate to this story in some way. Can you guys hear me all right? I feel like I need to bend forward here a little bit. So the greater point of the story is perspective, but it sort of meanders around and it gets there. So it goes like this. The invisible mom. It started to happen gradually. One day I was walking my son Jake to school. I was holding his hand and we were about to cross the street when the crossing guard said to him, "Who is that with you, young fella?" "Nobody," he shrugged. "Nobody?" The crossing guard and I laughed. My son is only 5. But as we crossed the street, I thought, oh my goodness, nobody? I would walk into a room and no one would notice. I would say something to my family like, "Turn the TV down, please," and nothing would happen. Nobody would get up or even make a move for the remote. I would stand there for a minute, and then I would say again, a little louder, "Would someone turn the TV down?" Nothing. Just the other night, my husband and I were out at a party. We had been there for about 3 hours, and I was ready to leave. I noticed he was talking to a friend from work, so I walked over, and when there was a break in the conversation, I whispered, "I'm ready to go when you are." He just kept right on talking. That's when I started to put all the pieces together. I don't think he can see me. I don't think anyone can see me. I'm invisible. It all began to make sense. The blank stares, the lack of response, the way one of the kids will walk into the room while I'm on the phone and ask to be taken to the store. Inside I'm thinking, can't you see I'm on the phone? Obviously not. No one can see if I'm on the phone or cooking or sweeping the floor or even standing on my head in the corner, because no one can see me at all. I'm invisible. Some days I'm only a pair of hands, nothing more. Can you fix this? Can you tie this? Can you open this? Some days I'm not a pair of hands. I'm not even a human being. I'm a clock to ask, what time is it? I'm a satellite guide to answer, what number is the Disney Channel? I'm a car to order. Right around 5:30, please. I was certain that these were the hands that once held books, and the eyes that studied history, and the mind that graduated summa cum laude. But now they had disappeared into the peanut butter, never to be seen again. She's going, she's going, she's gone. One night, a group of us were having dinner, celebrating the return of a friend from England. Janice had just gotten back from a fabulous trip, and she was going on and on about the hotel she stayed in. I was sitting there looking around at others that were all put together so well. It was hard not to compare and feel sorry for myself as I looked down at my out-of-style dress. It was the only thing I could find that was clean. My unwashed hair was pulled up in a banana clip, and I was afraid I could actually smell peanut butter in it. I was feeling pretty pathetic when Janice turned to me with a beautifully wrapped package and said, "I brought you this." It was a book on the great cathedrals of Europe. I wasn't exactly sure why she'd given it to me until I read her inscription. "To Charlotte, with admiration for the greatness of what you are, building when no one else sees." In the days ahead, I would read, no, devour the book, and I would discover what would become for me 4 life-changing truths, after which I could pattern my work. No one can say who built the great cathedrals. We have no record of their names. These builders gave their whole lives for a work they would never see finished. They made great sacrifices. You guys can be seated, by the way. Sorry. I'm not very good at this, as you can tell. They made great sacrifices and expected no credit. The passion of their building was fueled by their faith that the eyes of God saw everything. A legendary story in the book told of a rich man who came to visit the cathedral while it was being built, and he saw a workman carving a tiny bird on the inside of a beam. He was puzzled and asked the man, "Why are you spending so much time carving that bird into a beam that will be covered by the roof. No one will ever see it." And the workman replied, "Because God sees." I closed the book, feeling the missing piece fall into place. It was almost as if I had heard God whispering to me, "I see you, Charlotte. I see the sacrifices you make every day, even when no one around you does. No act of kindness you've done, no sequin you've sewn on, no cupcake you've baked is too small for me to notice and smile over. You are building a great cathedral, but you can't see right now what it will become." At times, my invisibility feels like an affliction, but it is not a disease that is erasing my life. It is the cure for the disease of my own self-centeredness. It is the antidote to my strong, stubborn pride. I keep the right perspective when I see myself as a great builder, as one of the people who show up at a job that they will never see finished, to work on something that their name will never be on. The writer of the book went so far as to say that no cathedrals could ever be built in our lifetime because there are so few people willing to sacrifice to that degree. When I really think about it, I don't want my son to tell the friend he's bringing home from college for Thanksgiving, "My mom gets up at 4 in the morning and bakes homemade pies, and then she hand-bastes a turkey for 3 hours and presses all the linens on the table." That would mean I'd built a shrine or a monument to myself. I just want him to want to come home. And then, if there's anything more to say to his friend, to add, "You're going to love it there." As mothers, we are building great cathedrals. We cannot be seen if we're doing it right. And one day, it is very possible that the world will marvel not only at what we have built, but at the beauty that has been added to the world by the sacrifices of invisible women. It's a great story, right? Yeah. Not really the point of what I'm talking about, but I thought it was a good story. So, many of us have had times as a child, as a spouse, as a student, as employees, where we have maybe felt invisible. But like I said, that's not necessarily the point of what I'm talking about tonight. The point is the God perspective. The perspective that she felt invisible, but God saw everything that was going on in her life. Life is largely about perspective. It is not that our individual perspectives or indeed our temporal perspectives are a source of truth, but they are the lens that we see the world through. And that is the case for each of us. Our perspective matters. It makes the difference of whether we have a good day or bad day. It makes the difference of how we treat our fellow man. It makes a difference how we view ourselves and thereby interact with the world. Perspective matters. Perspective matters, then position matters. Because depending on where you are metaphorically standing, your perspective can change. And I'm going to go deep for a second, and then I'll come back up for air, I promise. A Sony informational page regarding cameras says, when talking about focal length or focal length range in the case of zooms will usually be the foremost consideration when choosing a lens for a specific photograph or type of photography. The focal length of a lens determines two characteristics that are very important to photographers: magnification and angle of view. Longer focal lengths correspond to higher magnification and vice versa. Wide-angle lenses with short focal lengths have low magnification, which means you have to get physically close to an average-sized subject to fill the frame. But that also means you can fit large subjects in the frame without having to shoot from a distance. Telephoto lenses with long focal lengths have high magnification, so you can fill the frame with subjects that are further away from the camera. So even with artificially increasing our sight through a photo lens, the focal point and perspective matter. And this affects the magnification capability of our vision. In the book Introduction to Quantum Mechanics, A Time-Dependent Perspective, I know you guys have all read that one. It's popular. It's on a New York Times bestseller list. It says, in geometry, a position vector, also known as location or radius vector, is a Euclidean vector which represents the position of a point P in space in relation to an arbitrary reference origin O. That space corresponds to the displacement from O to P. Continuing on, in quantum mechanics, the position operator is the operator that corresponds to the position observable of a particle. The eigenvalue of the operator is the position vector of the particle. In physics, potential energy is the energy of an object or a system due to the position of the body or the arrangement of the particles of the system. All right, I'm done. What does that all mean to us? In the natural world, quite a bit. But in the spiritual world, what it means is position matters, perspective matters. What your viewpoint is matters. Listen to the words of the Apostle Paul as found in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, the intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand miraculous signs, and Greeks look for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. Amen. For all of creation, humans have struggled to have the perspective of God. They have struggled to understand his ways. Their goals were not his goals, their passions, not his passions. Even those that were allowed to have a very intimate relationship with him, that saw his miracles, that felt his presence, that to some extent knew that he existed and believed it, but they still did not get him. We are sanctified, we are set apart, but we are not the center of the story. God is the center of the story. Our purpose is not to glutton ourselves. Our purpose is not to make sure we are happy. Our purpose is not to make sure our neighbor is happy. Some of those things may be somewhat important. But our purpose, the reason we exist and why God created us, was for his glory. The reason why we struggle with what we are to do, with what happens to us, or why God did not do something for us, is because our perspective, our focal point is off. What happens in our life as a Christian is not about what we are going through, and definitely not about why it is happening to us, but it is all about his glory, his plan. God has the entire universe to keep going, and he has over 7 billion people he is concerned with. And this does not mean that your story is not important to God. It does not make God not a personal God. What it means is the overall story of your life is interwoven with all apostolics, all Christians, all people, all over the world. You might have gotten into an accident to witness to the other person that you got in the accident with, or the paramedic, or police officer that responded, or doctor or nurse at the hospital when you get admitted. You might not have gotten that promotion at work because your coworker might have lost their house if you had gotten it instead of them. It is important to keep the proper perspective. We in the West are tied to logic and worship logic, and we need to be careful as Christians not to deify human concepts. Logic is nice and helps explain a lot of things. A lot of those things I was talking about earlier are understood through the use of logic. But we cannot attempt to use our human, limited, and finite logic to define God's plan, or to understand his plan, or to put God and his plan in a box of our own reason. Isaiah chapter 40, verses 13 through 31, and it's a little bit of a lengthy reading, so I apologize, but I felt like it sort of set a tone for what I'm trying to talk about here. Who hath directed the Spirit of the Lord, or being his counselor hath taught him? With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and showed to him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing, and Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beast thereof sufficient for a burnt offering. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing and vanity. To whom then will ye liken God, or what likeness will ye compare unto him? The workman melteth a graven image, and the goldsmith spreadeth it over with gold, and casteth silver chains. He that is so impoverished that he hath no oblation chooseth a tree that will not rot. He seeketh unto him a cunning workman to prepare a graven image that shall not be moved. Have ye not known? Have ye not heard? Hath it not been told you from the beginning? Have ye not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in, that bringeth the princes to nothing. He maketh the judges of the earth as vanity. Yea, they shall not be planted, yea, they shall not be sown, yea, their stock shall not take root in the earth, and he shall also blow upon them, and they shall wither, and the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble. To whom then will you liken me, or shall I be equal, saith the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number. He calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might. For that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel, my way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God? Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. God is awesome. He is a holy God. He is a righteous God. He is the God of glory. And we are his glory. Why is sin bad? Sounds a funny question, right? Why does God care about sin? Obviously, it's for us, because those things that God calls sin can destroy us and do destroy us. They are harmful to us. Just as with Adam and Eve in the garden, he wasn't creating a rule for a rule's sake. He was trying to help them and protect them. But God also cares about sin because sin makes us a reproach. And since it is all for his glory, that is the true sin. That we are brought under the power of any is a sin. We are to be under his power. He is in power and for his glory wants us to serve him alone, not the gods of this world and not the God of our own will. God is love. He is. But he is also a God of judgment. The judgment comes because of his holiness and his glory. He loves us, but he cannot lessen who he is. Even when he came in the flesh to the earth and lowered himself in that way, his morality never suffered. He lived without sin and did not just tell us to keep with what was given in the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments, but he drew all lines closer to him, to his holiness and his righteousness. We must do better because we are his, and he is perfect, and our goal is, with his help, to constantly be perfecting ourselves and those around us. To be honest, the phrase, with his help, is insulting to him. What can I do to make myself better? In what ways have I bettered myself? What doors have I opened? Or wisdom have I gained outside of him? And the answer to all of those are none. The children of Israel were children of promise. They were called to be God's people. They were chosen to be God's people, but they were myopic and self-centered. God called them a stiff-necked people. They misunderstood their calling. They thought that because they were God's chosen people, that they were once saved, always saved people. The children of Israel were like the child who is told their whole life how gifted they are, but the child lets it all go to their head and never has the discipline to make any of the natural giftings develop any fruit in their life. They were always told they were gifted, but never told that in order for the gifts to come to fruition, you must work and develop the infant, yet innate gifts. They missed the point of their calling. Their calling wasn't for them. Their calling was for God. Their calling was for his glory. He wanted a people that were set apart, that would show forth his glory by being a great people, a gifted and favored people, that would be a witness to the whole world of the greatness of their God. But instead, they were an embarrassment to God. They sinned and sinned and sinned more. They not only sinned, but they cheated on God with other gods, little g's. But God is so great and so awesome and so powerful that he still received glory from this people. He still did great works for them and through them. He rose up a remnant that did love him, that did hear his voice, that would speak his word and his will. Men like Samuel, David, Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Nehemiah. Women like Hannah and Naomi. In fact, Naomi means my joy, my bliss, or pleasantness of Jehovah. So the Lord still received glory and was well pleased by certain individuals that had a proper perspective, that put themselves in the proper position. Ruth did not know what she was doing or what she was saying, but like people we come into contact with every day, she knew she had encountered a special people, a people who knew God, and she had a desire to know God and to be close to him. God granted her this request and not only allowed her to be a part of this chosen people, but allowed through her marriage to Boaz to make her part of the lineage of David and subsequently the lineage of the Messiah. Why? Why would God have done this for her? What did she do to deserve this? The first reason is always for his glory, to show forth his master plan that interwove these disparate people and brought her not only into the people of Israel, but part of the most important bloodline in the history of the Hebrew people. The other reason is because of her passion. God desires passion. He desires our desire. What he craved from the people of Israel was for them to seek him. And for the most part, they did not. Those that I listed earlier were those that did seek him, that did have passion for him and for his law and for his people. God responds to passion, and our passion brings him glory. Right. Another group that was very close to God but did not totally understand him or what he was about were the disciples. They fought and bickered over position, but if they had the proper perspective, they would have known that the only position that matters is following him. We are not in competition with each other. We are in relationship with each other. Right. We are all brothers and sisters in the Lord. Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 6 through 8, I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither is he that planteth anything, neither he that watereth, but God giveth the increase. Now he that planteth and he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor. You might be of another pastor, either at this church or at another. I might be from Pastor Clark's church in Kalamazoo, but now I am Pastor Walker's church in Troy. And I love my pastors, and I brag on my pastors. But what pastor you and I are from does not matter. We are all one unified body. The disciples were unaware that they were going to be the founders of a brand new church, and that their unity was going to be the sign that all men knew that they were God's. They missed that it was not about their individual glory, but about the glory of God. Judas so missed what God was all about when Mary tried to show her passion for God and recognize his glory that Judas was concerned about money of all things. God is not concerned about our money. He's not concerned about our OCD and the things that we think need to be in the proper place and the proper thing. God doesn't care about any of that. When someone is out of place or what we think is out of place in worship in the house of God, he is about his glory. He wants to see our passion for him, and our passion for him brings him glory. So when you hear a Native American war whoop, as my old pastor used to call it, or see someone run the aisle, don't be ashamed. Recognize it for what it is. It's God's people being passionate about him and giving him glory. Don't be like Judas and criticize a worshiper. Have a proper perspective. What are we doing here anyways? What is all this for? Is it not for his glory? Are we not to bring him glory in his house? His best requires our best. But I thought God was not a respecter of persons. He isn't. We all start from the same spot, at the foot of the cross. We choose initially to spit on him and thrust our own spear into his side, or to pick up our own cross and follow him. That first choice, if we choose correctly, makes us children of promise. Beyond that, the Lord continues to develop and work on us and bless us. But to what extent he can and will is based on our commitment to him. We can definitely stand in the way of God doing a work in us and in the way of God doing a work for others through us. James says in chapter 1, verse 20 of his book, but wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? Why did James call the man that does not understand this concept vain? Because once again, it is about the proper perspective. If you think because you showed up, that means something, or that makes you special, then that is vain. Because none of this is about us. It is about him and about his glory. It is about what we can do for him and not what we can get out of it. Don't live for God like a kid wanting an allowance. I have kids, they want an allowance, but the last thing they want to do is do anything for said allowance. And so many people live their Christian lives like that, where they are wanting something from God, but they're not willing to put forth 3 ounces of effort to be able to get anything back. God honors effort. He honors passion. He does not love one of us over another, but he is a holy God, a righteous God, a faithful God, and a righteous God, a righteous judge, I'm sorry. So, lest you feel like I'm getting off on a tangent and trying to preach some kind of Joel Osteen prosperity message or something, I'm not. So does this mean that because we paid our tithes, served his kingdom, helped lost souls meet Jesus, and did everything we were called on to do, that we will have no problems, that all of our bills will always be paid, we will never get sick, we will never have problems, everyone will love us, and healing is coming our way? To some of those, maybe yes, but it is not a guarantee. So how can that be okay? How if I forsake mother and father and do everything in my power to do what is right, how can I not get my healing? How can I not get my miracle? Are you ready for the proper perspective? Because it's not about us. It's about him. It's about his glory, his master plan, his will. We are just one person, one family, one church. God has the whole world in his hands. His plan is interwoven between all of us. He is such a great God. Pastor talked about this a couple weeks ago, that even though he gave each of us a free will, he is able to work his master plan in and out of our odd behavior, our failed attempts and our failed results, and our bumblings of the things he gives us. He's able to work something great out of it and fulfill his plan. In closing, I know we're at time-wise, but I'm wrapping up. For those of you who do not know, when I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had leukemia. It's a cancer of the blood. It was caught pretty late, and I nearly died. Unbeknownst to us, until the end of my treatment, on the third day of my treatment, my blood was in full remission, and on the eighth day, my bone marrow was in complete remission. But since the doctors did not disclose this to us until the end of my treatment, I went through 26 months of chemo and 3 months of radiation. And despite others in my group at the clinic having relapses, being horribly sick, and some of them not making it, God saw fit to grant me a miracle and heal me. And he made an event for all of my unsaved family to witness and change their hearts regarding my family and the apostolic way. Somehow, for some reason, it was within God's master purview to save my life. And I thank him for it. For those of you who do not know also, a few years ago, my dad was sick. He was diagnosed with basically a terminal diagnosis. He sought God for a miracle. He went to Lee Stone King Healing Services. He went to the altar every time he could to be prayed for. He believed all the way to his death that he would be healed. He told me so 2 hours before he died. But his healing never came. Medicine was available to cure him, but they wouldn't approve it. God was able to heal him, but his healing never came. But through his death, many of the young men at the church in Kalamazoo that were fence sitters, or as we would call them, potluck Christians, have caught fire. His example and spirit through his trial was a witness, and through him having joy and faith and believing for his miracle, even when it didn't come, brought about the saving of souls. My brother-in-law is one of those that has been activated and committed since the death of my father. I would love for my dad to have been healed and for him still to be with us. But he was saved and is in heaven with a new body and no pain. And now my brother-in-law and my sister and my two beautiful nieces can someday join him. Amen. God had a master plan, and it was for his glory. I don't know what you're going through tonight. I don't know what your trial is. I don't know why you're going through it. What I do know is that God does, and he has a plan and a purpose for it. Good. All we can do is have the proper perspective. Right. Keep our focus on him. Bring him glory through our attitude and our worship. Amen.